So, as I've said a million times when people ask, how do you do sports or how do you talk and come up with something every day? And I say, I don't. I just sit there and it falls in my lap, which is what happened with Kareem Hunt. Your thoughts with the opening commentary halfway through the show?
Well, it's going to sound like I've rehearsed this opening commentary, but I want people to know that that's not the case.
Well, okay.
Yeah. Listen, John Dorsey has built a solid reputation in this town for many legitimate reasons. But watching him fumble around to justify the Kareem Hunt signing wasn't his finest moment in front of a camera. As for talent procurement, he got a dynamic player for little cost and next to no risk. And in that sense, he is doing what the Browns have paid him to do. Ownership must have okayed Hunt's acquisition, so the Haslams are the ones who should have been at that press conference answering the questions that Dorsey faced. Like, what does this signing say to the fan base about violence against women? Dorsey couldn't answer that. With 2 owners active in league committees in 2019, I guess what I'm saying is he shouldn't have had to.
You know, I think they did the right thing when Freddie Kitchens was introduced. They had Jimmy and Dee in the front row and no speaking part. This one, John Dorsey doesn't make this move, and I don't know that he was fully committed to what he was saying. He fumbled around. He wasn't as sure as he didn't win the press conference, I suppose.
No, I mean.
So does that make you think that it was his idea, or maybe it was the Haslam's idea?
Well, I don't think it was. I certainly don't think the Haslams said, go get us Kareem Hunt. I think Dorsey was the one who said, I've drafted this guy. I know this guy. He's a good teammate. He made a mistake. He's an unbelievable talent. Let's put all those things together. And then they came up with, from an organization standpoint, I believe they came up with this idea that he's going to have to reach these benchmarks along the way, or there's going to be zero tolerance, all that stuff. But once you let a guy in the building who's been guilty of violence against women, you can't tell me that zero tolerance has the same definition as if you decided as an organization that you weren't going to sign people like that.
What is zero tolerance? Running a stop sign?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, or did they have zero tolerance with Antonio Callaway early in his career when he had a couple of missteps after they signed him? No.
Well, here's the question that wasn't asked or answered. You have a daughter, I have a daughter. How do we explain well, your daughter probably is not a Browns fan, but mine is. How do I explain that to her?
Well, and that's the question I think that was asked of Dorsey. And you know, when Dorsey talked about doing this extensive research, I think there was someone there from one of the local stations. I wasn't at the press conference, so I don't know who it was, who said, well, did you talk to the victim? And he said, no. So, I mean, there are just certain things that you mean,
how do you do a long search if you didn't talk to her?
Yeah, like how extensive was this research? You know, now maybe they made that attempt, but he probably would have said so if they had.
Right.
So I think that's what the whole league, not just the Browns, but the whole league is fighting this. You know, this is an awful thing, and you can't just treat it like it's. I hate to say it, but you can't treat it like it's a guy getting in a scuffle at a bar with fans screaming at him.
And here's the other thing. Do we now, have we been relegated as fans to the point where we're rooting for number 27 without knowing anything about him or what's inside that uniform?
You hear these arguments when you listen to sports talk radio when something like this happens, and people are saying, well, if he was just if he was a salesman or a sanitation worker and this happened, nobody would even know about it.
Well,
right?
That's true.
Okay, but this is different, and this is a sport where you're asking the people who are paying money, they're emotionally invested in the people that you put in your uniform, and you're asking them to cheer those kinds of people. And sometimes, look, we saw it in the 90s with Albert Bell and some of the things that he was involved in and the way he treated people, and yet everybody I know stood up and cheered for him every time he got a hit.
If he's with some other team, they don't do it that way. So I don't know. I personally, as we sit here in mid-February, I'm having trouble thinking of myself cheering for the guy.
Yeah, I know.
As a longtime Cleveland Browns fan.
And I think everybody they'll have real individual feelings about that. I think there's a lot of people that have told me that same thing that you just did. And there's other people that told me that, well, if he stays out of trouble and he shows that he recognizes he made a mistake and he's back on the field in 2 months and into the season and he's doing great things for the Browns, I don't have any problem with cheering for that. I'm cheering for the team, not all the people that are wearing the uniforms.
Let's also say that the Jim Brown stuff was 50 years ago,
Yeah.
and people who remember Jim Brown still remember that from 50 years ago. That's a long time, and I think the NFL and Jimmy and Dee Haslam, I know they understand from a marketing standpoint. A lot of women, a lot of young girls are football fans. There's no question. You can't have big numbers on television without all areas of people, genders, whatever.
Yeah.
So they got to deal with this. They didn't deal with it during the press conference the other day.
That's what I would
what
like
do they do?
I don't know, but I would have liked to hear from them. And it's not only because Dee's a woman and is so heavily involved in the organization, but as owners, with trying to be attentive to a fan base and needing that fan base, I would have liked to see them address that fan base.